you've learned a lot about brands and how to create, a branding mechanism, that people fucking care about and all these different things. But it's more than just the care thing. It's how do you create product and instill love in that product. So when Manish created this last company, he sold it to his investors based on love. And when he started getting, doing incredible amounts of revenue and having tons of users, then immediately everybody started to talk about love in the boardrooms, right, Manish? So the first thing I want to talk about is how do you even come up with the ideation process, and where do you find the courage to build product based around those principles?
Well, I think love as an emotion is sort of very fundamental to everything we do. Whether you look at sort of the large social products or small social products. The challenge is that how do you sort of tie love to the other basic need that we have, which is money. And what happened in our previous company was we created something which was a very powerful, vigorous community built around shopping and sharing. And yet when it came to monetization, we had to sort of start to intrude into that cycle. So one of the things I'd always been thinking about is how do you create this virtual cycle where love and money are kind of interconnected in this powerful, wonderful thing. And what we saw was that in fashion, when you connect the ability to tap into natural inventory that everyone has, which is sitting in their closets, combined with something that every woman has, which is great styling instincts. And then the last piece is the fact that every woman is a shopper, and you put it all together in this integrated sort of community. That's where you create this very powerful symbiosis of love, where women are sharing fashion, they're curating their closet, and also sharing and curating other women's closets. And that whole cycle creates a lot of energy, which is in so many ways validation and love, but at the same time they're here to shop, and so that creates money as well.
Yeah, and so there's several different outliers, and one of the things that we should probably do is talk a little bit about like the Poshmark story and the application that you built, just to kind of give people some of the highlights, so the number crunchers can see the proof. Yep. In this concept, because I see us saying love and everybody's like, oh my God, Reg is a hippie, yeah. Right? I know that the auditorium smelled like that yesterday, but yeah. We had a Tech 9 concert the day before, so if everybody felt a little bit happier, not my fault. Mm-hmm. So explain a little bit the number crunching pieces. Sure. There.
So Poshmark is a mobile fashion marketplace. We bet the company 3 years back on doing an end-to-end platform on mobile. At that time, there's a lot of skepticism that mobile will be a place that people will shop. And the stat I heard yesterday from some of the Amazon guys today is that they're doing 30% of their revenue on mobile. We certainly do almost close to 100% of our revenue on mobile. So Poshmark is a network of over 400,000 closets/boutiques. We grew roughly tenfold last year in terms of the scale of the network. Average woman who uses Poshmark spends roughly 20 minutes a day on the app. 7 to 8 times she opens the app. Somewhere close to $500 million+ worth of fashion inventory gets uploaded on Poshmark on a yearly basis at the current run rate, which is in Poshmark prices, which are typically 30 to 50% of retail. So in retail sense, it's closer to $1 billion worth of inventory being uploaded. And what's amazing is that people are not just buying, selling, they're curating, they're sharing, they're commenting, they're liking, they're engaging with each other in significantly meaningful way. One of the things we created were these virtual shopping parties where women come and buy and sell in real time. And they've kind of taken up a life of their own, where we went from thousands of items being in a party to 250,000 to even sometimes 300,000-400,000 items being shared to a single party.
So let me break this down so you guys don't, just because I want to make it very, very clear. Manish has built a mobile application, and in just a short time has 400,000 stores where people can buy and sell and create something out of his application. But not just 400,000 stores, and have $1 billion in inventory in those stores. It's an engaged community around the product that he's built. And so many of us are building applications, we're building shines, we're building watches, we're building all these things, And one of the biggest issues or problems that we have is that people will wear a wearable product for 6 months or 3 months or something like that, and then they'll kind of go away. And so as they're building these products, like there are certain principles that you need to understand in order to keep your community engaged, to keep them excited around what it is that they're building and excited about what it is that they're touching every day. And you are probably, without a doubt, one of the most influential, creative, and talented people at bridging this community around retail. And I know that he's too humble to say it, but I do think that there are certain principles that you had with your users at the very initiation of the product and the product cycle, and one of those things is built around love. And why don't you explain a little bit deeper around that and how those pieces kind of all fit together?
Sure. So, one of the things that I think is critical is there's sort of this urgency to get the product to market and scale up to high volumes. And building that sort of early core foundation of human connection and connectivity really takes time. So for almost the first 6 months, even more, maybe 7 or 8 months, we had an MVP that we had out there. But at the end of 7 or 8 months, we had maybe 200 users. And what we were doing was really recruiting these users 3, 4, 5 at a time. Not far from here, in a wine bar called District in Soma. Literally meet there with a few users every week and recruit them. Our first set of transactions were almost like little handbags being traded with little cash between women, and we were facilitating that. But what it did was it created this very powerful connection between people and between us and people. Between us and people, and that created a very meaningful human connection. And what it also did was it allowed us to finesse the kind of interactions you wanted in the system, the kind of content we wanted in the system, and created an editorial tone without it being editorial. It was coming genuinely from the community and slowly facilitated the community interaction. So as we started to scale, those principles were codified. So that was sort of one. The second thing is, if you're going to build something, you have to very much participate in it. So the early users, the early participants, obviously were some of the key, my co-founder, our head of community. But probably for the first 9 months, every single customer service call, I personally responded to, again, setting the tone of how you interact with with everyone in the community. And then the third piece is, as the community is scaling, particularly I think in wearable gadgets and mobile, it's actually easy to facilitate physical interaction. And I think that's super powerful, even though it's not completely scalable. Being able to do that just creates this very powerful cycle. So we actually started to do our virtual shopping parties in physical locations across the country, and they become very powerful in creating community. And today, women across the country facilitate and create their own physical posh parties, whether it's in Chicago or Boston or even smaller towns. And so it creates the foundation of what is a meetup, but really a meetup that is based on the principles on which Poshmark was founded.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two solid takeaways that I got even from like listening to a lot of the guys building it. So a lot of times when people are creating their wearable technology, what they do is they build it in a vacuum. Like it's them, it's their team, this is cool, this is sexy, they wear it all the time, they show people. And one of the key takeaways, if you're an entrepreneur and you show your application or technology to someone else, people will almost always say, oh, this is incredible. It looks great, this is amazing. You need to be able to get past that bullshit and really get down to where you're really talking to and interacting and touching those end users. Like that's one of the more difficult pieces. And so, if you can actually, take the time to have those groups, and not technologists, but people who are really within that radical demographic whose lives you're making more convenient, like that's one of the most essential pieces. And I think a lot of times because you're either raising money or you're worried about prototyping or manufacturing or even, look and feel, like, you run a fashion company, like where the majority of your users are women, right? Like, I have to believe that you don't necessarily have an inner woman that you can reach out and touch to. I think that it has more to do with being empathetic and being able to trust that you can give your users what they want if you just listen to them.
Yeah, and I think on one hand it's very important to listen to your customers. On the other hand, it's also equally important to ignore them. So, and that's really, I think, the conundrum in building products is because if you listen to the customers a lot, typically what the customer is going to suggest is evolutionary, because what they see is what they can sort of project out a step. And a lot of times when people are going through either an irritation or an inconvenience, they'll come up with some thought. And the truth is they haven't really realized how that's going to fit into their life. And so you add that feature, and it's a hard thing. On the other hand, if you can ignore the surface of what they're telling you, but really get into the heart of it, and then figure out how your product evolves to it, that's really powerful. So I'll give you an example. We have started the platform where all of our interactions between the community are public. And that's sort of not been done in a marketplace before. People have private messaging and a whole bunch of things. And there's issues with it, there's no doubt. But it has allowed us to scale a platform in very different ways. And people have been asking us for private messaging for a long time. And we're actually launching a set of features around it. But it took a lot of internal debate and discussion to figure out what was the essence that was missing in our current platform that has to be added as an overlay. And really distilling it is very, very key. I was talking to a couple other sort of people who think through the same thing, where people are asking for a lot of features, and mapping it into something that isn't going to make your product super feature cluttered is a hard thing. And you see that with mobile and gadgets even more, is you have to synthesize into just some very, very simple things. And that's really hard. It's not an easy process.
I think it's equally hard because the majority of the co-founding teams right now are engineering minded. They're engineers. And the way how a lot of times engineers fix things are they layer on and add in features. And all of a sudden you've got this overly robust piece of technology. I'm wearing a Misfit Shine right now. It is about as simple as you could get, and yet it's extremely useful, and it's one of the many that I wear, but this happens to be the one that I have on. I don't want to pimp anybody else. But like it's in essence, it's very, very simple. And to be able to strip away and figure out what is convenient, what is going to make your user happy, how do you add that layer of necessity as far as a product into their lives without disrupting everything and without like layering on tons of complex features? Like, is there a process that you work with your engineers to help scale those things back? I mean, what are some principles that you can give to the young entrepreneurs?
Well, one of the principles that I always use is, and it's particularly true for consumer products, is that when you look at something, let's say you've created a screen, a product, and functionally you've thought through everything, you've thought through all the chess games, then I think you got to sit in a cold room, look at that thing, and really visualize how your customer is going to feel looking at it, right? And it's kind of a weird thing, but the emotion it invokes in you is really, really important. And then you have to say, what is that emotion? And typically I'll configure that screen in 2 or 3 forms and then look at it and stare at it and think about it and worry about it and obsess about it, because that feeling is the inexplicable sort of connection between you and the product. And it's just very hard to quantify with the fact that you've actually thought through all of the principles. For example, it can make you feel just happy, right? And the happiness doesn't have to be because it's very elegant or it's doing the functional thing. It's because there's certain things in it which connect with you that make you happy. So for example, we have this feature called My Closet Stats, and it gives you just metrics around what you're doing. And a lot of numbers are not very great consumer-friendly things, but the way it's presented, it makes a lot of our community feel happy going and checking it out. So even though this is kind of a secret page, nobody sees it, it's actually one of the highly visited pages because people like to see how they're doing. And how they're doing makes them feel happy. Even if they're not doing well, it makes them feel like, okay, I can strive and do better. So that's that emotion of how you feel is, I think, very, very critical to product design.
I think that's one of the interesting things because even with most of the fitness apps that I see, I mean, it's very much there's an immediate return. It's like, this is how you did today. This is how you did the day before. But what we haven't seen from a product evolutionary standpoint is this is how you've done over the last year. And I think that that's one of the things that's kind of missing if you're wanting to create some type of self-actualized product. you have to be able to show people what they've done over time. One of my favorite apps that I use is called Time Hop. And all Time Hop does is it pulls all your social media feeds from that day and over the past 5 years and shows you those pieces. And I'm going to tell you, my stuff is pretty damn hilarious, right? And I smile, I look at it every morning when it comes up, and I enjoy that aspect of it because it shows me like the evolution of self. And I think that in a lot of products, being able to show, how you're doing better, how you've evolved over time is something that we lack. I mean,
my latest favorite app that I just sort of admire is New York Times just released an app called New York Times Now. Initially, I thought it was sort of a copy of the Yahoo News app, which has been obviously very much given awards and stuff by Apple. But it turns out it's actually a fantastic app, and I just paid for the subscription of that app. And there are two things it does, is it limits the quantity of New York Times articles that are coming at you. But they're New York Times articles, so there's all the depth of the coverage. And then there's a little arrow, which I think they borrowed from Yahoo News, but it's sort of very simply done. But they have a couple other features where they allow you to save an article and bookmark it. Again, not revolutionary features, but whenever I open that app, I actually get delighted. Whereas whenever I used to open the New York Times app, I used to get overwhelmed and kind of feel sad that there's so much I'm missing out on and so much that I don't know. Whereas when I open the New York Times Now app, I feel like I know a whole lot. And it's the same content. It's just the way that they've synthesized it. It changes the dynamics of that content completely and makes it sort of so much more fun and exciting. And I mean, open the app 8 or 10 times a day, and it's very different. And
so I think this is one, really unique thing. And as we're wrapping up, real quick, I think that there's several principles that I want to relate back to the audience that I think are great. I think one of those, simplicity on feature sets, listening to your users but not doing everything that they say. I think that being able to, since most of this wearable is about data, wearable technology is about data, being able to show the evolution of self for the end user is such an important archetype that we need to embed into our products. I think that's one of the things that I took away from this. I love learning on stage. I learned a lot yesterday. I think the last thing I think is extremely valuable as far as a takeaway is creating an experience that brings happiness and joy in people's lives, right? And I think we're on our path there, but I think that we're still kind of missing out on it. If there's one 30-second thing that you can give to the audience on how to create a product that brings joy to the end users, right? Because I know you've done it. What is the thing that you think most important about bringing joy, or delight is probably the word. How do you bring delight?
Well, it's not a 30-second thing, but I think focus is really important. I think a lot of times we try to build things for a broader group of people, and just starting super narrow and really focusing it down to some very narrow segment will actually help you build a much broader product. So I think when you focus on something very small, you can actually create joy easier than trying to please the whole world at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's a theme that we've heard a lot. Manish, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Redg.
I appreciate it, brother.